I want to say happy Halloween and hope you're enjoying your week so far. Today I'm going to have a little bit of a longer stream where I'm going to be setting up for an encounter. Essentially, it's just a combat for zombies, and it's kind of themed for Halloween, but I kind of want to go through the processes and the different steps that you might go through. Now, some of this stuff may or may not apply to what you're doing, depending on how much content you already have, and also what stuff you have access to in regards to modules, adventures, and also art assets and such. So I got quite a bit to unpack here, but I think I wanted to start with first having a concept. So basically I want to run this for like a Halloween one-shot. I don't even really have a huge developed story yet. I just have this encounter, and if it goes well, I might expand upon it depending on how it's reacted to by my players, and also how smooth it was to run. So those are some factors that I would definitely consider when you're making content for Fantasy Grounds, especially if you do a lot of homebrew, that sort of thing, or maybe you're adding to an existing adventure or a one-shot where it's kind of weak, or it's missing parts, or you have to fill stuff in. So first things first, if you haven't noticed already, the latest and greatest Fantasy Grounds, as of yesterday I believe, they added a new section in the data types over here. So they have something set up for the new 2024 rule set, which contains locations, and they moved the quests and story items out of the campaign and moved it into the world. And this is going to be where you can actually set up locations. So if you've used some of the world building tools that are extensions, such as the player agency, it's kind of like that. You can set up sub-locations, you can designate the type, and then you have a description area, and then you have GM notes. So these are just things that you can fill in, and it would help you possibly get your location set up once that becomes more of a thing, like the bastions for the 2024 rule set. But nonetheless, that's just a minor change that's occurred. But I want to start with basically the artwork. I think that's probably the biggest visual appeal, but it's also probably a little bit more work, and it just takes some time to implement it, especially if you're starting from scratch. So I've kind of went through some of the assets that I already have, and I picked out some maps that are basically they're designed by Map Hammer. He is the artist, and anything I'm using in this video is going to be linked, including the audio. So the audio is plate mail audio. And then there is some other assets that I'm using that'll probably be from Fantasy Grounds. But nonetheless, I'm going to bring up my my hard drive here. And what I want to do is show you some of the things I'm going to be doing. So this zombie here is something I generated with AI. So I'm just going to copy this. And it's already kind of in a format that can be used in Fantasy Grounds. But if you want to save room, like you don't want to have a bunch of big files, you don't want it to be too crazy, this image is pretty high quality, and it is already at 6 megabytes. So that's a pretty good size file when it according to what it is. So what I would do with something like this is, if you have a lot of images, you want to compress those down to WebP if possible. And you could do that with most editors, depending on which ones you have. So I'm using GIMP, and all I'm going to do is just change the format of this image. So I'm going from a PNG file to a WebP file, which is a more of a compressed version of the image file, and it's going to take up less room. So this is just an image I would share with my players, like a handout or something like that. So you kind of get all this stuff worked out in the beginning, because I know it's going to be a zombie battle and encounter, but I want to show this before the battle or when the battle starts. So this is going to be a way to tell the story, or one way. So what I'm going to do is, in GIMP, I'm going to go to Layer, and if you're going to use this for, if you wanted to cut out the background, you could do that and try to use it for one of the 3D tokens if you wanted to. But in this case, I'm going to keep the whole image and just use this as a way to show more of the ambiance of the encounter. So I don't have to add the extra layer in there, but if you were going to cut out the background, you'd add a transparency layer. But in this case, all I'm going to do is hit File, and you got to hit Export, because if you hit Save, it's going to save it as, in this case, the GIMP format. But we want to save it as a compatible file for Fantasy Grounds. So PNGs work, but they get a little big. So that's why I'm showing you this. So I'm going to rename this to WebP, which is the format that we're going to be going to. So it was art_zombie_graveyard.png. So I just changed the end of it to WebP. And now I'm going to click on Export. And up here you have image quality. So Fantasy Grounds recommends 75%. And that's not a whole big loss. You won't hardly ever, you can barely tell with this compression. So it's really nice. It works better than JPEG and that sort of thing. So we're going to hit Export. And that should be it for that. I'm going to just going to close this particular image, but I'll leave GIMP up because I got to convert some maps. So this is the new image. And now that I hover over it, it is 261 kilobytes as opposed to almost 5.25 megabytes for the PNG file. So that's quite a difference. That cut that down by like, I don't know, like 10 times almost. So that compression ratio will vary depending on, or at least 5 times. It'll depend on the size of the file and how many colors and that sort of thing. But this is basically one of the things you want to do to help mitigate how large your campaign is getting, because over time when you have like a whole bunch of maps and a whole bunch of images and tokens, this stuff starts to add up, and over the course of adventure, a campaign, if you add a lot of assets as you go, that really starts to grow the campaign in regards to file size and memory. So you want to try to get that stuff compressed if you can. And that's what I've done here. I took GIMP and I converted this to a WebM or WebP app. And then what I'll do from here is to add something like this to your campaign. I'm going to go ahead and go up to Assets. And I want to make sure I click on Images, because that's where this is going to go ultimately. And then click on Folder. And that's going to bring up the backend folder for Fantasy Grounds, where I'm going to put the graphics files. So in this case, this is going to be a handout. So what I'm going to do is make a new folder, like a subdirectory, and I'm just going to call this handouts, because this is kind of, artwork, just things that you would show the players. It doesn't really necessarily have any significance like a battle map or something, but you could actually use that as a battle map if you really had to. So I'm going to take this image, drag and drop it in here. And then once it's in the folder, whenever you make changes to Fantasy Grounds, or you move files around, or you rename them, whatever you do, you need to hit this refresh folder assets, and then you'll see a folder called campaign. That doesn't exist until you add something to Fantasy Grounds, something out of, something that's not part of the original campaign. So a lot of the times when you buy pre-made, all that stuff's included, but you won't see this campaign folder unless you start adding your own custom stuff. So that's where this shows up. And then once you're there, here's the subfolder I made, and then here's the image. So what I would do with something like this is I can share right here with the players, or I can add it to the campaign records. So if I go to images, I can add it to this group. So right now it's set to all, which is basically all your books and everything that's going to be showing up once you have them loaded. But in this case, I'm going to make my own group. So click on the down arrow up here, click on this green add category, this plus button here, and then hit the edit button, which is going to allow me to edit the title. So I'm just going to say cemetery, because that's basically what this encounter is going to be. So I'll say cemetery. I think that's all I need to put. So here's the cemetery. And now I will add this campaign record. So when you click on this create map record, it's going to basically go into this subfolder now instead of being mixed in with everything else. So go ahead and click. It says create map record, which is kind of confusing, but it's just an image. So there we go. So here's the artwork, and then here's where the image is now. So it's now part of the campaign. And if you were going to export this is what you'd want to do before you move on. But get all your artwork done first. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. So this is just an image that I'm going to share with the players. And if you notice up on top here, it says art_zombie. So if you don't want them to see that, just put undead or something like that on the right hand side, and then unidentify it. So when you share this image to your players, it only shows this, not the title of the image. So that's a helpful thing if you're going to be sharing a lot of images or even a map. I don't know how many times I've saw where it says zombie boss lair or something like that, and the players look at that and they go, oh, is this where the boss is, stuff like that. So anyway, so this undead is basically ambiguous so that they can say, okay, it's a zombie, it's a ghoul, they can figure it out during combat. But nonetheless, this is just a way for you to kind of organize your images, and you get into this naming convention and then understanding some of the little nuances of Fantasy Grounds. One of the cool things you can do is when you share this image, you do that by right-clicking, and you go to sharing, and then you could share the record, and then that will place this little doodad here, which means it's public now, and this will allow for you to share this in your player. It'll push it to your players. But once they're done looking at this, maybe I'd leave it up for the duration of the encounter. But once I'm done with something like this, I would come in here and click on that public icon there to clear it, because you don't need to keep that shared the whole game unless you're going to spend the whole time in combat for several days or whatever. But those are just little tips and stuff that'll help keep your game lean, and you don't want to have lots of images shared. You might have a main overview map, maybe one image or a handout, and then maybe some artwork or something, battle map, that sort of thing. But you don't want every single image shared or tons of them shared after you've already gone through those areas. So if you've already explored a map and you don't plan on going back there, you might as well just unshare it. So this is just some tips that you'll learn, and that helps keep your campaign a little leaner, and it keeps from having to bounce that image back and forth between the host and the clients or the players when they don't need the image anymore. So that just adds to the overhead. If you keep sharing images and you forget to unshare them, eventually it adds up, and you get halfway through the campaign, you're wondering what's going on here. So it can impact performance occasionally, depending on how big the files are and how many, and also your network settings. So that's just the image part. Now I'm going to do a map. So this is another thing that you'll come across if you want to import third-party maps that are already created. So in this case, I'm going to add it to this back where I have the Fantasy Grounds directory for the campaign. I'm going to make a new subfolder, and I'm going to call this, this will be maps, and that's where I'm going to put the maps when I'm done converting them. Right now they're in PNG format, and they are pretty good quality, I want to say. There's two variations. I'm going to use like the medium quality one, and then there's a high quality one. Just don't think it's going to be necessary, especially for the amount of detail, and it depends on what you're doing. But I'm going to go ahead and type in graveyard, which is going to pull up those particular maps that I had from my archives here for Fantasy Grounds and for virtual tabletops. So while that's searching, the artist Maphammer was one of my first, I want to say the first one I subscribed to, or one of them for Patreon. And I just recently canceled my Patreon subscription because I have almost all his maps, and I don't know if he's still making them or what's going on, but I haven't seen a lot of activity. But he's selling the maps on his website, and they're not cheap. Like, well, because you're getting like 400 maps, so it's basically $400. But if you join his Patreon, you can go through and get all of the a lot of the older maps and stuff, and go through and get caught up on the collection. But so there's two variations here. There's a 70 by 70, which is probably what I'll use, which should be sufficient enough for Fantasy Grounds. And then there's a 200 by 200 version, which is a lot bigger file. This is almost 10 megabytes JPEG format. So I don't really need that. And then there's also a gridless and one with a grid. So I recommend, if you are going to use maps outside of Fantasy Grounds that are imported, try to find a version that does not have the grid. That way you don't have to fight with trying to line the grid up. The other thing that's nice is I know this is 70 by 70, so when I set up the grid in Fantasy Grounds, I just have to tune it to that. So what I'm going to do is take I'm going to take one of each. So one is a nighttime version, and then one is a daytime version. So I'm going to grab these gridless ones that are 70 by 70, and I'm just going to copy these because these are from a different drive or directory. So I'll just copy those, and then I'm going to go into the Fantasy Grounds backend in the map subdirectory that I made, and I'm going to hit paste. So those are now in the campaign, but I want to go ahead and convert these to a different format. Now these aren't too big. Like, this is only what, 1.5 megabytes. You can get away with this, you know, in the short term. If you only got a couple maps that you've added, it's probably no big deal. You know, you could get away with, you know, having a couple larger maps. But once you start adding like several images, and that includes tokens and everything else, it does start to add up. So that's what you have to think about in long term. You know, in short term, this is fine. But in the long term, if I start adding more and more stuff to my campaign, it really does add up. So that's why you want to kind of be more proactive instead of waiting till your game crashes, you know, down the road. So that's something that you'll have to experience. You know, it's easier to said than done as far as, you know, warning people about it, but you'll figure it out eventually. Okay, so this is just a GIMP, and what this will do is just give me the ability to convert. So I have two styles of maps here. So this is a gridless daytime version. And I think it's nice to have variations like this in case you start your adventure in the day and you end up at night or whatever. So I want to take this image, and all I'm going to do is export it as a WebP. And it's not going to save that much room or that much file size because the image itself is not huge. But when, like I said, when you add everything up, you know, over time, it does make a difference. So export, and going to put this as a PNG file. Oh, excuse me, wrong, WebM or WebP. And hit export, and then 75% is the recommended compression ratio. You don't have to do that, but that's what they recommend on the developer's guide. And then go ahead and hit export. And that's all I'm doing is converting those to a little bit more of a compressed format. I mean, JPEGs are already compressed, but the compression ratio is nowhere as good or near the quality that you would get for WebP. I think WebP was developed by Google. I don't know who invented JPEG, but they've been around for a while. So I'm going to hit same thing, File, Export As, and I'm going to change the last the extension on it to WebP, and then go ahead and hit export, and it's still set the way I had it before, and then let's hit export. So those are now converted to a little bit more of a compressed format. You're not going to lose quality or anything like that. They're pretty good shape. So this isn't as clear as the 200 DPI images, but it's good enough for a graveyard. I mean, I don't think it's going to need to be that detailed. The other thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of line of sight to this stuff. It doesn't need a lot because this is an open graveyard of just a couple trees, a couple headstones. And I picked this map intentionally because I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I will do some. So this is basically done now for the conversion part. So all of that stuff, you want to try to get that done first, I believe. That's my approach. Is if you have artwork, get all that done as soon as you can, because that's where a lot of time comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and close GIMP for now. Do I have any other art to think about? No. So I'll go ahead and close that. So now I have these two versions, so I'm going to get rid of the JPEG versions. And you look at the compression ratio here on, I mean, this is phenomenal. Let's see, so yeah, so these two were about 1.5 MB, and now they're less than half a meg. So this cut it down by 2/3 easily. So when you stack all those together, let's say you had 100 maps, you know, that's basically you start reaching a ceiling, because if you do any publication like on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, there's a 100 MB limit. So you'll reach that limit really quick if you don't compress your images. Unless you only have a few, then it probably won't matter. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these two, because I don't need two sets of the same thing. And then, like I said before, when you add or take away or change anything, you got to hit this refresh thing in the assets. And now I'm going to go back to campaign, and now here are the two different maps. So there's two variations. It's a daytime and a nighttime. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to take the daytime map and I'm going to add the line of sight and all that. Then I'm going to add this the nighttime version just to swap it out. They should be identical. So you can do that occasionally, get away with it when it's something not very complex with doors and windows and all that stuff. So I'm just going to use another image to swap that out in this case. So this is fairly easy to do in regards to that sort of thing. So what I want to do now is I want to add these two images to the campaign itself. Right now they're just in the assets folder. So I want to go back to images, which I already have up here. And you can drag these in one at a time, or you can use an import button here and do them all at once you're done with them. I recommend that if you're going to be doing a big project. And then you can also come down here and add items and such on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop these into this section here. So here's both of them, both the images. And as you see this dimension call out here, which is really nice to have. So if you have maps like that, that's going to help you out to know the grid size. But something like that, I would probably have put, I should have done this before, but I'd put map in front of that. And what we'll do is it'll help you separate these out if you get a lot of images. And what will happen is this list will stack up nicely for you, so you can go right to the content. You're not trying to click on every single thing trying to figure out what it is, especially if it's not named properly. So that's kind of what I'm getting at, is how it's named and how it's organized. So now we have the night version of the map. So I'm going to do the line of sight. I think I need to do it on the day version. So I'm going to go to... And it's kind of redundant. Actually, you don't even really need the day and night maps anymore, because Fantasy Grounds actually takes care of that. So honestly, I think I'm just going to do the daytime one. And if I want to make it dark, I'll just use the effects. So if I go to images, and then I bring up this regular map here, this is basically the daytime variation one. And then we can do all kinds of, we can put a mask on it to make it look darker without actually having to do anything. So what we'll do here is make sure you have the layer selected where you're going to actually place the line of sight. And then I'm going to expand the map out here so that you'll be able to see it a little bit better. And then, of course, I'm going to close some of this stuff out because we don't need all this stuff. and then go ahead and zoom to fit. And then I'll move that over so you can, when you have it expanded like this, you can use your navigation toggle and use this to, you can use your mouse wheel or you can use these buttons to zoom in and out. But this is basically just getting used to where to put everything and how you're going to present your data. But for right now, I got this kind of zoomed out so we can look at it and kind of have a little bit better idea of where we're going to be. So all I'm going to do is put a couple terrain things on these trees, and then I'm going to put glass around the tombstones and the walls because I don't really want to block anything here. There's really no reason to do that. It's a kind of an open area, so it's not like I can corral them in too many different places. I mean, there's a partial little walls here. I'm just going to put glass on there so that they can't walk through these headstones and through the walls. But other than that, there's just like a few trees and that's it. So it's really basic. So I want to make sure I have this layer selected, and I'll go into the line of sight tool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'll do all the bushes and trees. So that's going to be pretty simple. So I go to terrain tool, and all I'm going to do is just do a few clicks around here. I'm using the line tool, and just basically just kind of come around and you're just kind of doing the tree trunk at this point. So you don't have to do all around the whole tree, just just the tree trunk part of it, and maybe down here. And the only thing this might even come into play is for cover. So this might be something for that, like if you're trying to get behind a tree or something like that. But that's all I need right there. That's pretty much a done deal. Now for the walls, you could put depending on how tall they are, you could put a solid red wall that they can't see past, but I think that kind of makes it look weird, and I don't think it's necessary. And there's other ways to deal with shadows and that sort of thing. And plus, some of the shadows are kind of already baked in. So what I'm going to do is actually use a window, and all that does is prevent your players from moving through the area. It doesn't block the sight. It doesn't do any of that. So they just can't walk through the wall. That's all. So all these little headboards or these tombstones, I'm just going to make these little rectangles. And if they want to climb up on one of them, then they can talk to me about it. But this is just a quick way to kind of corral your players, but not actually cover up anything on the map so they can see everything. They won't be able to see this glass, but they're not going to be able to move through the wall. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is prevent them from moving straight through a wall. That's basically the only thing I'm concerned. I wouldn't even say concerned, but it does add a little bit of strategy, so that's the reason I'm doing it. And that's all I'm going to be doing, is just kind of just adding a little bit of this stuff as I need it, and it's really not that critical even. But it kind of adds a little bit more realism and engagement with a map if you do stuff like this. So, and here's that. And I got a couple like headstones that are curved or are at an angle. So with those, I won't be using the rectangle tool. I'll just use the line tool because they're not perpendicular or they're not 90 degrees. So that's all I do with those. Is I'll just do these ones that are at an angle. I'll do those manually. As you can see, I added the ones that I could do first, the ones that were 90 degrees. And these are kind of cockeyed a little bit, so that's why I'm doing it this way. And there's probably just a couple more now. So this isn't too bad. I mean, this is tolerable when it comes to time. So that's another thing, is like you get these big complex maps and you end up spending more time on that than actually playing. So my rule of thumb in most cases is if it's going to take you more than an hour to do this, it's probably not worth your time. Just get a map that's already done or something like that. And then if you have to, you can go back and make some adjustments after you get all that stuff in. Maybe you want to fix a couple things. But really, that's all I'm doing here is just, just kind of adding a few things for tactical reasons. And that's it. There's really not much to this. This is a really simple, basic map. So this is helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to say and do, is you want to add the grid. So I'm going to go to the grid system, and supposedly this is 70 by 70, so we'll find out. So over here on the left-hand side here, I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and as you can see, it doesn't line up because it's at 50 by 50 by default. But if I type in 70 by 70, that should clean that up. So you can see it's off a little bit, but it's still even. It's just the way that this thing lined up. So if you're that crazy about this, you can always just move the squares over instead of moving the image. So we want to keep the image centered. So that lines up most of it. It just has to do with the sizing of the map itself. So it's sized differently, but it works out. So this is most, like, we got all three sides, but this is the only one that's kind of left out, which is no big deal. So now that we have that there, I like to change the color of the grid, only because it gets kind of hard to see with that gray washed out color. And I'll put it like in a yellow or orange, and you can still kind of see the grid, but it's not overwhelming. So that's kind of, something that you can do. Now what we'll do is we'll add some variation in here. So we'll bring the map to life. So it kind of depends on if you have the Fantasy Grounds art subscription or if you've imported your own asset. So I'm going to add a little bit of animation, and I'm going to add a filter. So if we want it to be dark, we can just add a mask-like filter over the top. So I'm going to do that first. So we'll put some effects on here. And I don't recommend doing more than 2 or 3 effects if you can help it. That's really hard on the memory when you got like several live effects happening. So I just usually do 1 or 2. So the first effects layer I'm going to add is down here at the bottom. And up here where it says effects, I'm going to click on that. And the first effect that I'm going to be adding is actually we'll do the mist first. So this is the mist. We wanted to put like a little bit of this, and obviously that's way too fast. So if you go down to the center, it'll slow it down. If you go to 50, it's neutral. So that's just barely moving there, so probably like 48. Yeah, right in there. And then I'm going to turn down the amount a little bit so we can still see the map. It just kind of adds like some ambiance to it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this, we'll just call it Grave Mist or something like that. And that way we label these things so we know what it is. And I'm going to add a folder, and I'm going to say this is going to be ambient, and then that mist, I'm going to put it in there. Now I'm going to add the layer for the darkness or the shadow or whatever. So you want darkness. You could add it with the effects system if you want, or you can add like a mask that you can turn on or off. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to do, but I think the mask will make it look darker as opposed to throwing a shadow on top of it. So we'll see. But this may not even be worth it, so we'll find out. But I'm going to go ahead and click Effects again. This is going to be another layer. And I want it to be above the mist layer, I believe. Let's see. Do I want that? No, maybe. We'll see. So what I'm going to do is come down to... You can do time of day. And then you can change the time and the amount. So this will allow you to, change it from day to night. Or you can use a mask, however you want to do it. But this is going to give you an opportunity to do the slider to adjust it to whatever's going on in your game, because it could be dark or nighttime or daytime. You know, it just depends. So I like having that option. Now you can turn that off, but what I want to do is put the time of day, and that will make it so where you kind of have that option to recolor it, kind of give it that gloominess if you need to. And then it's sitting underneath the mist, so we can still see the mist going by. And then I do put a little tiny bit of blur on these, so it kind of blends in with the map, kind of feathers it in a little bit. And then I have this mist at about 60%, so it doesn't completely obscure the map. So that's that. And so we have our line of sight. We've got a couple effects going on. So I probably wouldn't do more than a couple of those, because they are really taxing on systems, especially older ones. So that's part of, you know, learning the limitations and the capabilities of any given virtual tabletop. So not just Fantasy Grounds, but any of them. They all have some kind of limit. So that's that. Now what I want to do is start looking at maybe adding some assets that are going to bring the map to life, because this is kind of static. I mean, that fog kind of helps a little bit, but I'm going to put a little bit of trees in here, kind of make this look a little neater. So what I want to do is turn off these ambient colors. So the reason I put them in that folder is if I want to, I can turn off this visibility and it just shuts them off altogether. So this is where you have that flexibility as a game master to control what's going on in your game. And now what I want to do is I'm going to have a new folder, I guess, and I'll call this, this will be animated assets or something like that, so I know what this is for. And now you're going to go into your assets folder. Now this is assuming that you have access to this stuff. Some of you don't, but so this is images. I'm just going to go back to the home key actually and go to images. And what I'm going to do is FG, which is Fantasy Grounds, with a space after it, and then I'm going to say animated trees or something, or I'll just say animated, because there's not a ton of them yet. I'll say, okay, we'll try a different one. Animation is probably the better phrase. No? Let's see. Animated. Let's try that. There we go. So there's air particles, and I don't want that. I think I wanted tree. Nope. Animated. Now let's see. This is probably one of the time. This takes time, because if you don't know what the files are called, it's kind of hard. So there's some bats that will circle around. So what I'm going to do is take this, left click, and drag it to the hotkey below. That way I can come back to it and I don't have to keep opening and closing this. Here's some animated bushes, so I want to grab that. And then anything else that might lend itself to... Oh, there's some falling leaves. I like it. So that's kind of very fitting for our show here. And let's see what else they got here. So there's some mist in here that you could add, but I don't think I need to do that. Yeah, I think that's good enough. So you don't want to overkill it. You know, it gets to be where you start losing performance if you get too much of this stuff going on. So just a few animated files, and all I want to do is just kind of bring this to life a little bit. So for instance, like these trees, they're kind of static right now. So what I want to do is take like this animated web M file, whatever, WebM, and place that and kind of blend it in with the image. So I'm going to come up here to the tools up here on top, and I want to go to the layers tool because I'm going to add these in as a layer. So for the bushes, I'm going to left click and drag and bring it up to this layer tab, And right now this says it's going to be 5 by 4. That's a little much. So I'm going to go with 2.5 and then click on that. So that's how many squares. So if I click on this, this is kind of going to go up in this area here. So we'll see what it looks like. Yeah, so what I'm going to do with that is go ahead and go to the selection tool and just kind of drag it into place. And I'm going to hold the I believe it's the Alt key, or excuse me, it's the Control key, and that'll help me line that up. And if I have to, I can kind of expand it a little bit. And then what I want to do is take that and go to the tint and turn that down. So it just kind of becomes part of the image instead of a separate layer sitting on top. It kind of blends it in a little bit. So you still get the movement, but then you still can see part of the stuff underneath. So that's one way to kind of liven this up. Now I'll hit OK. And now what I'll do is I already have this animated bush here. So what I'll do is I'll click down here to do a duplicate of that layer. And then I'll take and left click and drag it. And then I can use this rotation to kind of get it close to where I want it to be. And then again, I'll hold down the Control key to kind of move it in place. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll fade it in. So tint. And then this one, I'm going to fade it more because it's, and then I'll probably set it underneath this one. So I'll move that layer. So now it's sitting on underneath this particular bough. And then I might do one more down here, and that should be enough. So again, I'm going to take this layer I have selected, and I'm just going to make a duplicate of that layer. And I'll drag it where I want it to. Oops, I don't think that's the right way. I want, let's see, which one was it? Oh, not that one. Okay, so this one. So take this, rotate it, and put it down here. And of course, that one is going to be under that one. And then what I'll do is I'll take that and just kind of play around with the tint. There we go. And that helps it blend in more with the scenery. It's not perfect. I mean, obviously there's some mismatch here. I could recolor it if I was good enough with this stuff here, but I don't even play with that. So that kind of makes some movement there. And that's all I was really looking for. And you only have a few trees on here. So I think that one looks pretty healthy. So that one still has some good leaves on it. But in the case of, like for the other asset, I have these leaves that were falling. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that up here. And see where it already has leaves here. So maybe I will click here. This is 14 by something. That's pretty big. So I want to go with like 3 by whatever. And then I'm just going to click here and then I'll move it where I want it to go. So that looks pretty good right there. So I want to go back to the selection tool, kind of move that into place, and then go back to the tint tool again, kind of turn it down just a hair. So now you have this kind of this illusion of the leaves coming off the tree. And I'm going to put another one over here. So again, I'm going to take this layer, make a duplicate, and then move it over here. Yeah, I think that'll work. And I might tint this one just a touch less. There we go. So that just brings the map to life. I mean, it went from the static, kind of boring image, and now you got leaves moving around, and now I'm going to put the bats up here. So here we go with the bat swarm. So go ahead and click there. And these things are kind of, I don't know if I'm going to use these actually. Well, I don't know. We'll see. So that's a 4. It's pretty good size, so we'll see what it looks like. Yeah, that doesn't really fit because of the angle. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I just wanted to see what it looked like. Yeah, nope, no bats. Sorry. It doesn't look right to me. It looks like it doesn't make sense at all. Okay, so now we have all the assets in one folder. And if we want to turn those off, we can. We can turn the visibility off or we can turn them on. Whatever you need to do for your game. So it just depends on what you're doing. So that's one set of things that, and then there's our mist. And I think I'm going to turn that down a little bit more, the grave mist. So I want to select that and then go up here to effects. And then the amount, I think I'm going to come down. Oh, it's locked. I got to unlock it. So there we go. I just turned it down to 45, from 60 to 45, so it won't be so, crazy. And that's really the, just adding those little details just really makes the whole thing pop a lot better. Okay, so that's maps. Okay, so we did art, we did maps, and now I'm going to make the encounter. So with the, I'm going to actually compress this back or decrease it back to where it was. Okay, so now that we have that dealt with, now what we're going to do is start working on the encounter. And what I'll do is make a bookmark of this so I can recall it and I don't have to dig around looking for it. Go ahead and lock this up, right click, kind of get it centered, and then we'll see what we're going to do with it later. Because I'll need to put things on it later, so we'll just leave it like that for now. Okay, so all we're just going to do is create zombie encounter. But I want to show you a couple of cool things that you might want to consider, especially if you're going to run this adventure or this encounter more than once. So it's nice to have these encounters kind of ready to go, and you can adjust them if need be. So right now I have on the combat tracker, I've got 4 players. And these are just like emulating for PCs. And I'm just going to go to menu, go to rest. I'm going to do a long rest because one guy was injured here. Okay, so now that we have all those guys ready to go and the rounds are reset, now what I want to do is add these to the party sheet. So this is an important aspect of Fantasy Grounds if you want to use the party sheet and the functionality. So this gives you an overview of your group, and it also helps with other things like distributing wealth and XP and kind of get a bird's eye view. You can see who has dark vision. You can see their armor class and perception, all that stuff here. It's like kind of like a summary, and then you can manage their inventory here. If you want to see who carries what, and this is where you distribute the loot. And then the order tab is something you can use for setting up your marching order. So for instance, the monk is probably going to be towards the middle. So I'll probably put her there. Wizard is probably going to be towards the back. Paladin is going to be up front. And the ranger will probably be in the very back. So those are the kind of like your arrangement. And this is facing north, so if you wanted to change it from right to left, you can use the arrows down here to change the direction. And all that does is it gives you a way to set up the arrangement ahead of time, and that way if you were going to place them on a map, they're all ready to go. So that's basically the arrangement here. And then if you want to set up a watch order, it basically probably have the paladin take the last watch, and then wizard probably the third. A monk will be the first one to go to first on watch, and then the ranger will go second. So this is just an order of who's watching when, and that sort of thing. It doesn't do anything mechanically, but anyway, so that's getting this part set up. Now the reason I did this is because there is a formula you can use to help generate your encounter based off the number of players. So it's really cool. So I want to go to, let's see if I hope I have any zombies in here. I don't know if I do. Yeah, great. Cool. Zombie, okay? So these are going to be our zombies for the encounter. And then I want to go to encounters themselves. And again, I'd make my own group. So this is going to be the cemetery encounters. So all my cemetery encounters would go in this group if I had more than one. And then from here, I'll just add a new encounter. And this is a static encounter I'm going to be building. So we'll say zombie attack, something like that. And then we'll just drag the zombie over there. And there's one now. So we can set it to, let's say, 5. Okay, that's the maximum. So you can do something like that. And then you want to hit the refresh for the CR rating and for the XP. So you can do something like this and then just pin it to the map. And then when you need it, you can run it that way. So if I go bring up the map again, right at this point, I can set those guys in a position so that I'll know where they're going to start off. So I can go put one kind of closer because the PCs are going to be down here by this fence. So I'm just taking each one of these and placing them strategically and kind of spread out. And I got a couple reasons for that. One, fireball. And two, it kind of makes it harder to address these guys when they're spread out. So and then this guy will kind of have some cover right here. So this is just a preliminary setup. So if you wanted to kind of get your zombies in place before the encounter starts, so that they're all set. Now they're all placed. And when I close this, they're going to disappear off this map, but they're still there. They just won't show up until you actually open up the encounter and you hit add to tracker. But I want to pin this to the map. So this is going to create a little red pin that only I can see as the GM. I'm going to put it on this little wheelbarrow. And this will be where I can click on that when it's ready, when it's time to play. I just click on that and hit add to tracker, and then all the zombies are already pre-placed. So they're kind of hard to see because they're not visible yet, but they're on the combat tracker. So that's that. But I'm going to go ahead and remove them. So menu, delete all non-friendly. Okay, so that's one way to do it. You just have a static encounter, that sort of thing. There's another way you can do this to make it kind of like if you wanted a higher replay value, is to go and to add a kind of a random encounter. So if you go to encounters, on this actual, instead of doing it here in the regular encounters, you go to random. Okay, so this is going to give you some more variation. Again, I'm going to make a new group and edit the group, and I'm just going to call this cemetery because it's all related. And then get out of the edit mode, click on there we go. So we got our own group. So go ahead and click on this add item, and what we're going to do is just add the one zombie from our NPC record. So I'm going to take that, put it on here, and now what you can do is ask this to basically you can put a 1d4 and have it roll. You can do like 1d4 plus 1. You can do a little bit of variation in there. What I'm going to do is show you this formula, which isn't used very often, but I think it would work well in a situation where you have playing with different groups of people that have different numbers of people in their party. Now, this doesn't really consider CR levels or character party level, anything like that. It's strictly based on the number of PCs in the party sheet. So they have to be on the party sheet for this to work. So when you have the party sheet here, this is where it pulls from. It doesn't pull from the combat tracker, it pulls from the party sheet. So whoever's on here. Now, it doesn't count NPC friends and allies and that stuff, just the ones that are on here. So now what we can do is we can say $, which is part of the code, $PC. So what this does is you can say 1 plus, and the $PC means that Fantasy Grounds is going to look at the party sheet and it'll calculate based off of how many are on there. So I can go 1 plus the number of PCs on the party sheet. So if I click generate, it should give me a total of 5 zombies. So it's 4 plus 1. So I'll hit generate. There we go. There's 5 zombies. So you can do this in different ways. I can do, let's see, twice the number of PCs maybe. So 2 asterisk. So that's multiplication. Hit generate. That should give me 10, I believe. Yep, or 8. Excuse me, because there's 4. Yep. So there's that. And then conversely, you can do division and subtraction. So maybe you want 1 less zombie than there are players. That should give me 3. Yeah. And you can do division too. Now for division, if you do do like a right/2, it's going to give you 2 because you have 4 party members. So if I click this, it'll give you 2. Now if you have an uneven number, like let's say you had 5, it will generate 2.5, but it will only show 2 here. So you just have to manually change the number, and it always rounds down. So if you have an uneven number, it will round it down. So that's just behavior of it. But those are just ways that you can make this a higher replay value if you're going to run this encounter. So in this case, I just want 1 more zombie than there are players in this case. And I can link that to here as well. So we have a static encounter and then we have a random encounter. So there's 2 different encounter types. Depending on what you're doing with the adventure or the encounter itself. And if you want like a higher replay value, that's kind of what I'm going for, is I want the replay value to be higher for my players so that when I want to run this more than once with different people, I don't have to mess around with all that stuff too much. And it just gives you more options is all it does. So we kind of went over making this kind of more memorable. So the last part of this is I haven't used the locations yet, but I did add this graveyard, and I guess this is going to be my location. I don't know. I don't think you can drag these records in here. Yeah, I don't think you can do that. Can't. Oh yeah, you can. You can link the for the description. You can link the map in there. And this is a part of the core now, I think, or at least for the 5e rule set. So there's the link for the graveyard. And then what I'm going to do is, in this case, I'll use like generative AI tool like ChatGPT, and I will take this information here, and this will be my GM notes. And I'll hit copy here, and then down in my GM notes, I put that here. So as the adventurers tread softly through a desolate graveyard under a haunting full moon, they sense a creeping chill that sinks into their bones. Out of the shadows, a decayed figure staggers into view. Cue the image that I made earlier. So I would probably link this image to like right up here where the players start, and open this up and then share this image at this point. So go to share record, and then they'll see this pop up, and I can even put mist on here to make it match kind of what's going on over here, just so you can have more flavor. And then from there, I might even add a description for the graveyard. So I might ask this ChatGPT, I'll say, what I'm going to do is take the image that I had from earlier, and I'm going to have it make descriptive text based off of that to help with some context for creating the encounter. I can do it myself, but it would take a little longer. And that's part of this, is like you can't use Chat GPT for everything. You got to do at least a third of it yourself, because it kind of gets robotic, or it's not quite what you want, and then another thing is you waste a lot of time trying to prompt it and such. So my advice on this kind of stuff is to do it sparingly, or to do it like 50-50 or something like that, because I've been messing with it for months, and what I'm finding is that I'm kind of dicking around with that more than actually doing anything. So you kind of want to balance that out between generating content and actually running your games and prepping and such, because you get to the point where you're just spending all your time on that, and it doesn't help with the adventure really. It starts becoming more of a burden than a help, and that's not what you're after. So anyways, you could take that image of a map that we had from earlier. I think I deleted them. Let me restore those. I'll just restore one of them. So this is the nighttime version. I'll just do this one. So I'll restore that one. Okay, so basically you can take an image or any image and drag it into some of the generative AI tools, depending on which ones you're using. I think most of them now are accepting images to look at. I don't remember, but anyhow, that is something that you'll, basically have to decide, is it's worth your time or what. But anyway, so I'll take something like that and add that into Chat GPT or whatever program you're using. So it's going to look at that image. I'm going to say, based on the attached image, create a descriptive text for the encounter above. I'll say using as context. So totally cheating here. So instead of making it up, I'm just saying, hey, do it for me. Based on the attached image, create a descriptive text for the encounter above using the image as context. So we'll see what it does. You may not even like the outcome, but this might speed things up for you, especially if you're doing a lot of homebrew. This might be helpful. So as adventurers step through the iron gates, oh yeah, it can look at that. Wow, that is really cool. All right, so, and there's even a distant owl. How does it know that? I have a Plate Mail Games audio in the background that has an owl sound. I think it's a coincidence. But anyway, so I took that descriptive text and put it over here. And this is going to give me this stuff for the location. And like I said, the map's linked here. Let me see if you can format this stuff. I don't know how much he's done. Let's see if we can do a header. I'm just going to try this out. Yeah, so you can totally form. So these are formatable. And then what we could say here is this is an encounter. So we can give it a type up here. And then if you had a sublocation, you can link another, or you can, let's say you had a dungeon. Let's say you can go inside a dungeon here. So you can start a new location and pin it here. Like say this is your dungeon or mausoleum or whatever, then you go to another section. So it's kind of cool. You can really start linking stuff together and making it more accessible. So this is something they're working on in SmiteWorks it's part of the new update if you did it recently. So this is kind of cool. So, I mean, this is a lot of work for a one-shot, but once you've done it, it's really nice. Now, when I get ready to play, I would probably take and, let's see, I will take and get this map up. And then take the players. Remember, I had that formation, so they should all be in a straight line. So if I drag the faction over, yeah, so there they are. And then right click and zoom to fit. And then take this directional tool here, navigation panel, and move that over a little bit so we can see what's going on, and maybe there we go. So this would be where I'd want to be starting off adventure. So probably something like that. And then once the encounter happens, I can go up to the zombie attack, the one that was static that we already had set up, or I can do the random one and hit generate, and it'll generate off the number of PCs. And then I can just hit, I can place them right now, or I can just wait and just do it as a group. So I'll just say add to tracker, and then at this point, since I didn't place them ahead of time, I'll just drag them on here and then move them around right before the action starts happening. There we go. And then we can unveil them, and there we go. So Bob's your uncle right there. So that's kind of where you'd want to be to do like a one-shot adventure. And that took me, without explaining and going through all that, probably took me about an hour to do it. But anyways, I think that's all for today. I've done a lot of different things. So we imported maps, we added line of sight and effects and animation. We set up an encounter. We placed the encounter. We played around with some of the new functionality for locations, which is going to be very similar to, if you guys use the extension, I mentioned it earlier, player agency. It's going to be similar to that. And then there you go. So that is a Halloween themed one shot. This will probably keep you busy for an hour and a half, depending on how you role play and such. But that sounds fun. And now roll initiative. So menu, go to initiative and roll for everyone. All right, so now if I click on him, now the ranger goes first. Bring up his character sheet. Now I always usually have it over here. And go to the actions tab and change this to combat, and now we're ready to go. And he has archery as his ability, hunter's lore, favorite enemy. So yeah, so he's ready to go. This is exactly where you'd want to be when you're starting this adventure after your session 0, of course. And these little window things here are going to block the players. They can't move through there. So you have to either open that up or they have to go around. So anyways, take care, folks. Have a good one. Happy Halloween, and I'll see you guys around next time.